I see we've got a few of our speakers on here, which is wonderful, in addition to Tracey. Hi, Shauna. Hi, Krista.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
Hey, Krista.
Hi. How are you, Sherry?
I am
got
doing
a nice background going on there.
Yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful here this time of year, but it is a little bit hot today.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gorgeous in New York. Oh my God, we just went through 10 days of nightmare humidity.
Ugh.
And now it's gorgeous. So I'm very thankful for that.
Fantastic. Hi, Shauna.
Hi. Nice to see everyone.
Hi.
Hey, Erica.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good.
All right. Well, some of us have met, some of us haven't. So we'll do some intros in just a minute. But and I think there'll be women joining as we go through this. But my name is Carolyn Ray. I want to thank you all for coming and welcome you to this, what I hope will be an informal chat. This is obviously to talk a little bit about women's travel wisdom and the retreat that we've got coming up. But we also wanted to introduce you to Tracey Breeden, who is our presenting sponsor, which we're so grateful for. Thank you, Tracey.
Yeah, you're welcome. Glad to be here and looking forward to the event. So can't wait.
And Tracey and I, just a bit of a backstory, we met a few months ago at Women's Travel Fest, and she, I knew her by reputation from her work at Uber, which we'll talk about in a second, and also now she's at Match, and so she's kind of moved from the physical to the digital world of women's safety, and is just a perfect partner for our very first inaugural Women's Travel Wisdom Retreat that we're having in October of 2022. And just curious, who on this call is coming to that? Just hands up. Quite a few. Oh, wonderful.
To the retreat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We also have a few other speakers on the phone, and I just want to give them a little bit of a shout out. So first of all, Sherry Kendrick with the hat and the beautiful palm trees behind her is our event manager, and she's in Honduras, so we can all be jealous of that a little bit. Shauna Robbins is our wellness expert, and she's somewhere in California, I would guess, at the moment. Santa Barbara. And Krista Stanley is in New York, you said?
New York.
Amazing. And what we thought we'd do today is just, we're going to talk a little bit about with Tracey about women's safety, and also what she's passionate about at the moment. I've had some great chats with her about women's rights and human rights, and I just wanted to give her an opportunity to share that perspective with you as a little taste of what we're going to be talking about at the retreat. But our retreat is, for those of you who may not know about it, is a 5-day retreat in Northern California at Mandala Springs Wellness Center. We've got incredible speakers, as you can see, some of them are here, and incredible women coming. And we really see this as an opportunity to reconnect as women and talk about how we can create some positive change for ourselves, first and foremost, and also for the world, because I think what's becoming more and more apparent is how important we as women are. And I think, if I can say, women of our age, getting out there and doing what we can to make positive change happen through our networks, through our influence, through our purchasing power, all the things that we hold. So Tracey has spent, I guess most of your career, Tracey, was it as police officer, more on that side of the business, and then you've more recently transitioned into kind of the corporate side of things, first at Uber in 2016 and then at Match in 2020. You want to tell us a bit about your background?
Yeah, it's definitely not the normal transition. I tend to tell people that, you find your purpose, and when you look around and you see things that break your heart, and then you lean into it, and sometimes you just follow where that leads you and guides you. So I spent a large portion of my career in policing, and like many women in policing, you're in the minority, and you tend to very quickly, and I did this, identify areas where I could lean in and create impact. I'm particularly focused on the safety of women, people of color, and the LGBTQ plus community, and really started to develop my safety approach, as I would call it. I always say I'm building a community of safety. And my approach was that if we create safety for those that are most vulnerable, then we create, and when we focus and prioritize in that space, then we create safety for everyone as a result. And so that I spent a lot of time in policing, and particularly also worked in the space of domestic violence and sexual violence, and did a lot of work in that space, which caught the attention because of some of the innovative things that I was doing there, caught the attention of Uber back in 2016 when they were in the middle of what they were in the middle of, from harassment on the inside to sexual assaults happening connected to the Uber platform, and not really knowing how to address that or what to do. And so I was given the opportunity to go to Uber, and I did. So I made that transition out of law enforcement into that corporate environment, and started to kind of develop and create what I would call the way I approach safety, and built that foundation within the corporation. And I say I infiltrated a system and began to do the work that I do around safety. And people tend to think safety is about physical safety only, but it's not. It extends beyond that to emotional and psychological safety, and helping prevent people from experiencing hate and harassment and discrimination in all forms that it shows up. And so that became what I created, and I became the first head of women's safety and gender-based violence programs at Uber, and helped drive a lot of the product that you see today within the app, as well as their focus and programs in this particular space. And then that caught the attention of others, and I really kind of created a partnership approach where partners like expert women's groups and law enforcement, nobody was talking to people within the community that were on the front lines addressing these. And corporations are very much siloed, and they don't want people, they think if they talk about these things, or they invite experts in to talk about it or to help them, that it will reveal that they have a problem. And so shockingly, we all know that those things occur. So it's not that that they tend to think sometimes the public isn't aware of it, and the public's very much aware of it, particularly the groups who are impacted by violence the most. And so really kind of set up that approach successfully at Uber, and then others came looking for me to do similar things in the safety space and social advocacy space, which I call it. I stood up a social advocacy pillar at Uber. And so Match Group came along, and for those of you that don't know what Match Group is the parent company that owns pretty much all the major players in the dating app community except for Bumble. So, Tinder, if you've heard of Tinder, Hinge, Plenty of Fish, OkCupid. They own quite a few dating apps and also across the world. So I came over, they invited me to come over and play in this sandbox in the dating community. And I thought, what a great opportunity, because I think Carolyn mentioned that I went from the physical space to the digital space. And actually, I kind of live in the intersection of both now, because the dating app community, dating apps are very similar to the gig economy in that you're connecting strangers, and then at some point they're connecting in real life. And so there is real life harm that can occur. And then there's that digital space, which is the space that the Facebooks and our social discovery apps are all a part of, as well as the dating community, where people are interacting on a digital online platform. And what's occurring on those platforms are the same things that we see a lot of times in real life: online hate, discrimination, abuse, harassment. All of those things are happening online. So I also create safety initiatives, products, programs, partnerships that address that in that environment, as well as in the in real life environment. So for me, it's a unique space in that there is a opportunity to create safety for people in all spaces that they're interacting with, or interacting in, I should say. So it's a little bit of a history of how I made my way into the space of private corporations and tech, pretty much, and have been working in tech for now since 2016, doing this work. So, and I tend to be very disruptive, and once I get in, I don't think they know how to get rid of me if they ever did want to get rid of me. I get very, I come in and do a lot of good work, but I'm also not afraid to cause some disruption and get corporations to pay attention to things we should be paying attention to, and that we have a role and a responsibility in our communities to take meaningful action to create safe spaces for every person that is using these platforms.
Whoa, that is. What do you think, that when you talk about what needs to be disrupted, what's kind of on your radar when you look at the world right now? And I know that's a big question, but just want to launch us into a bit of a discussion around safety and segue into some of the human rights things that I know you're really passionate about.
Well, I think the thing that I see certainly that is pressing upon me, and I think all of us, particularly women and the LGBTQ plus community, is seeing rights stripped away. And watching that happen, particularly over the last 30 to 45 days, seeing what's happening across our country when it comes to laws that are, specifically targeted against women, people of color, and the LGBTQ plus community, it impacts me personally. Being a woman, being a queer woman, it certainly is on my heart, and I'm also a member, I'm in these corporations. So I see in my space, what is pressing upon me and where I think that corporations can play a role. But I look at it through the lens of safety, where some people may look at it through a lot of lens, but I believe that when we take rights, fundamental human rights away from people, we are creating that is harm against people, and that we are creating unsafe spaces by those actions. And so it connects directly to women's safety. It connects directly to the safety of traditionally marginalized communities. And so seeing this happening has really outraged me as well as many others. And I see those fundamental human rights connected directly to the safety of all humans, of all people. And so I see it as whether it's a women's rights issue or it's a LGBTQ plus rights issue, I see those are all connected. Those are human rights. And so that's something but I see it connected to safety. When you hear me talk about it, when we talk about activism and what we should be doing and what we can do in this space, it is connected to the safety of people. And I do believe these injustices are harmful acts against people, and they fuel hate, and they fuel they fuel this they fuel and they drive this space that becomes dangerous and harmful for all of us, and it impacts all of us. And so that's something that I've really seen in my role, and something that's kind of really been recently pressing on me and connected to me personally, like I said, but also just connected to my vision, because my vision has always been the same vision, whether I've been in policing, whether I was at Uber or a Match Group, and that, is to build this authentic, to build this equitable, and, space and respectful community of safety. And that is tied to human rights at the end of the day. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned to me right before this call that you had been invited by, I guess President Biden is creating a committee. Do you want to share a bit about that?
Yeah. Well, it's been, we were seeing across the world, many online, many regulators, governments who are now stepping into the space of, we need to regulate. We need to create online safety bills. We need to address these issues, and how gender-based violence is showing up on these platforms in the form of online harassment abuse, and also seeing how it is directly impacted, not that it's not impacting men, but the groups that it is primarily impacting adversely are women, people of color, and the LGBTQ plus community. So what we're seeing is, and I've been on many discussions with different government officials and been invited to speak because of the work I do. There's not that many people who do the type of work I do in corporations and in tech, specifically focused on these groups, and specifically focused on the safety of these groups. So it is an approach that's not the normal approach when it comes to safety. And so I've been invited to have a lot of these discussions where many tech companies won't even come to the table to have those discussions. And so I've been invited and this is due to the work I've done in this space and my work, in tech and beyond. To speak to President Biden and it was announced, I guess it's been about 45 days ago, Vice President Harris announced that President Biden was starting a task force that would be specifically focused on addressing and coming up with solutions to address online harassment and harm specifically against these groups. And so I've been invited to Washington, D.C., and I'll be traveling there on September 19th to speak to the task force, to talk about, how I see this issue and how I feel it should be addressed, and what is it. And these people are being invited not just from corporations, they're inviting experts from women's groups, from government, from law enforcement. So it's a privilege that I get to come and I get to represent, my expertise in this space, but also my feeling about what is the role of corporations, and what should we and what can we do in this space to help address this, epidemic that is a global epidemic. And it is by, we can't ignore the fact that that has been present and we have been experiencing for years is now showing up, and it's amplified on these tech platforms.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're talking a little bit about the U.S. here, but the things we're talking about are global issues. They're not restrained by boundaries, especially in the digital space.
It's global issues because these digital spaces, they touch every country in the world, and they're being utilized by people around the world. And so if you think about it, and gender-based violence has also been an epidemic globally for as long as we can know, as long as we can remember. And we haven't seen a lot of movement. We've certainly seen good things happen, but if you look at the statistics, if you look at what UN Women and others tell us, it's not getting any better. And certainly in this online environment, it's very concerning to me. I describe it as the wild, wild west, because people can come on these platforms, you don't know who they are, and they can show up. And the other thing that's very concerning to me is people, and I've had several conversations where people tend to just think that what happens online is not as severe as in real life. it's like, well, it was online. You know, you're being harassed on, they tend to downplay the seriousness of these things happening in this online digital environment versus in person. They don't realize that there is just as much emotional and psychological harm that can come from interactions in that digital environment, harassment in that digital environment, hate, as it can in real life. And think about it, you don't know who they are, they're not being held accountable. Certainly they're going to be, it's just going to be free reign in what they say and they do. And we have to do everything we can to prevent it, to disrupt it, and to respond appropriately to it. And those are kind of the three approaches that I take to it. Is we should be doing all that we can to prevent it. If it's happening, we need to disrupt it. And then if it does happen and we weren't able to prevent it or disrupt it, and somebody's reporting to us, we need to make sure that we're holding people accountable, and we need to make sure that we're responding with empathy and understanding, and we're providing people the appropriate response and resources that they need. So for me, it's a holistic approach to this. I know I can't stop it 100% of the time, but I'm sure as hell going to do everything I can to prevent it and disrupt it from happening, because I do understand that the element of harm is just as great as it is in real life.
I want to make sure that you all can ask questions. So if you have any questions at all for Tracey, please don't hesitate to just, wave or put your hand up or put them in the chat or whatever you're comfortable with. I know she's eager to answer anything and everything, isn't that right?
You got it. I mean, I love answering questions, and I know what I talk about it's heavy stuff, but it's also heavy. It is also like, it's the reality of our world, and we're in this space. I tell people people are a little in shock, I think, a little bit in what's happening and what's happened. And it's also like not in shock, but it's like, what do we do? Like, never expected to be here. And it's like, what do we do? And what does that look like and that's kind of what I'm seeing too in my opportunity to just help people organize around initiatives, help corporations organize around initiatives and actions that we can take that can create, more impact and meaningful impact in this space. And so, and I think that's the positive thing, is there's such opportunity for us to do and lead in this space. And I think women, if you look historically, we have been leaders in every movement that has driven change in our country and across the world. And it's an opportunity for us to organize and assemble and really help drive the change that we need to see. Let's see, can you tell us more about your role and what you will present at the conference? So role specifically to my role at Match Group, or more about my role as what I will play and what I'll talk about at the conference? I just want, just to be clear.
I think you're muted, Suzanne. Want to try again? Still. Well, we know what half of that is.
Well, I can talk about, or you can just put it in the chat, Suzanne, in the chat. What I will present about on the conference is really the connection between women's safety and human rights. So I'll go a little deeper into really, and more focused in that space on talking about that connection, as well as how I'm really trying to, drive activism in this space and helping people understand what their role is, what type of actions they can take, what we can do as leaders in corporations as well, and really driving social activism and what that looks like. But it will really be talking about the connection and how women's safety is directly connected to human rights and vice versa, and how we can helping people identify meaningful actions that they can take in this space.
Yeah, and Tracy's, so we're going to have a panel. I think it's on the 22nd of October, if I got my dates right. And I'm going to host that panel with Tracy, and we're just figuring out who the other panelists will be, but we know that one of them is going to be Long Un, who's one of our speakers. Long wrote the book, First They Killed My Father, about her experience in Cambodia, which was made into a movie by Angelina Jolie. And so she's very excited to join Tracy in this discussion because they both have incredible experiences to share and wisdom to share. So we're just working out the details of the panelists, but so far it's, I think it's in the afternoon of one of the days. I just can't remember. Sherry can tell me which day. I can't remember which day offhand.
No, I'm super excited about it. I think, you know, you get two activists together, no telling what'll happen. It could be fun. We might come out of it starting a movement. So
We need
That's
one.
very cool.
we do need one.
Yeah. I see my friend Andrea has just joined, and Andrea is hosting, and I are hosting a little event this week in New York. Thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry I'm so late, but I love that I'm joining in just as we're talking about creating a movement and two activists coming together. That's like the perfect time. That sounds like some fire that I would expect from these women on this call.
Yeah. It's a perfect recipe for disruption.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What other questions do you all have for Tracy? What kinds of things are you curious about? We talk a lot about safety here at JourneyWoman. Obviously, it's a really big deal for us, especially when we're traveling both at home and abroad. Tracy, I know you've done a few interviews with me on tips and things like that. Is there anything that you'd suggest? Just because I do think that sometimes we feel the burden falls on us more and more.
Yeah.
And, you know, without putting too much weight on the average consumer, you know, who may not be so tech savvy, what's a simple thing we can do when we're living in the online world that we can do to protect ourselves?
Yeah, I think, you know, this is something, and I just, so everyone knows, I've been doing the travel fest, and you know, I'm a solo female traveler myself. So I have my own stories and love that. And while I was at Uber, that really brought me to this group and talking a lot about this group because people are using Ubers all over the world when they're traveling. I use Uber too when I'm traveling, and you know, there was also good things that came out of the conference and conversations we had, because one of the things that I took back at one point was, you know, Tracy, no matter what country we're in, we don't know exactly if some harm happens to us, like, where do we go? You know, like, where, I mean, even finding emergency numbers is difficult, but like, not everybody feels comfortable going to the police, and in many of these countries, law enforcement is also a very corrupt system, and it has its own problems. Even in the US, not everybody feels safe reporting or going to the police. So what are those other groups where we know, whether it's a women's group or it's a group focused on safety, sexual violence, any kind of violence that could happen in those countries? And so I really took that back because there was no universal place you could go and find that information. It's very difficult to, and worked with a global organization called No More to create a global directory where now, you know, you can go to that global directory, you can hit on any country, and it's going to tell you the national hotlines, it's going to tell you groups that you can outreach to, which was really just an excellent resource that came out of having these conversations, getting feedback from women who travel. But everybody's always asking me, you know, about safety tips, whether they're using Uber, whether they're, you know, physical safety tips. And now I get the question of, you know, in the digital world, because people are online, I mean, for not just dating, I mean, I'm talking to people who are using these apps for finding connections. It makes some moms nervous, but a lot of the Gen Z folks I talk to, they use these apps to actually find places to live, to stay overnight at other people's homes across the world. They're using these apps to find parties, and even our age, people are using this to find friendships, connections. You look at kind of the romance and confidence scams. Those typically are impacting every age, but from 45 to 65, that's traditionally where you're going to find most of your victims in that space. So I get a lot of questions, and certainly I tell people, and I hear that also all the time, is that the burden, really falls on us, and it does. I wish that there wasn't such a burden that fell on us as women and the people who are impacted most by these things. But there's definitely technology in place that we've created that can be utilized. And then there's those tips that we can do ourselves. And I think when you're talking about kind of this digital online environment, a lot of what I tell people, and I think Carolyn also put this in her I think it was the newsletter from, it might have been last month, and talked about some of the things. But the big thing is I tell people it's unrealistic to tell people not to share personal information, because that's the whole point of connecting on a dating app, is also sharing personal information, but to be very careful about what you share outside of whether it's a phone number. I tell people to stay on the app as long as you can, because it's built with safety in mind, is having your communications as much as you can through the messaging that is on the app before you take the conversation off the app. And what I'll tell you is what I've seen in coming here, I've been in this industry now about 1.5 years, is some of the trends that I see is people are trying to get you off the app quickly. They're trying to take you to another site. They're trying to get you to go communicate with them somewhere else really quickly. And that is that's a big red flag. So that is one of the things. Be careful what personal information you share, but also be careful of those people that want to get you off of the app, as quickly as they can. If
I could, Tracey, I think that applies to just about anything.
Yeah.
Because I had a similar experience with an Airbnb app when I was in Mexico, and the woman wanted to get me off it right away. And because there was safety issues with her place, right? And had I gone off, then Airbnb wouldn't have been able to monitor that conversation. And as it was, they saw that I was sending pictures of things that were unsafe. They were looking at our exchanges, and much to my shock and surprise, refunded me the whole stay, and called me and made sure I was all right. So once you get off the apps, there's you're not being looked at by anybody, I guess is what I would say.
Exactly, and they're typically taking you to a site where they're probably going to try to get money out of you. They're going to try to do all kinds of things. So I think staying on does a couple of things for you, just like it did there. Is the one-on-one conversation you're having with that person is private. Okay, so for privacy laws and other things, we can't monitor that. But let's say that somebody says something and you feel like you're being harassed and you report that to us, then you're giving us permission to go back and look at all that, and we are able to go back and look at that person's profile, the communications they've had with you. So that's an important piece, is like if you go completely off, and that's why they try to get you off. They know those safety precautions are in place. They know there's things there. So that's part of the reason they're trying to get you off of that platform as quickly as they can. The other thing I tell people is to definitely utilize video. You have the opportunity with many of these apps already have video options built in. Is to get somebody on video and get them to talk to you on video before you're going and meeting them in person. That's a really important piece. That way it's just that extra step. Many of these apps also they have a verified profiles if the person has done like a selfie and done a liveness check. And so it's important that you also kind of look for those verified profiles or ask them to do a verification where it will do through the technology, be able to confirm that they are a real person. So things like that I think are really important. I tell people, you know, my number one tip is always follow your intuition. I've always said that your intuition, just if something feels off or doesn't feel right, don't ignore it because it's usually right on 100% of the time. The other thing that I've noticed in this environment, and I'm always, you know, I used to be a detective, so I'm studying people's behavior. I'm trying to learn, like, how do these suspects, you know, how do these bad actors, as we would call them, you know, how do they behave? And one of the things I've noticed in this space is that, and I think it's been a great tip for people, is to pay attention to boundaries. And you will see that if somebody, how do they respond when you say no? How do they respond when you say, I don't feel comfortable doing that right now, or I don't want to go offline, I would prefer the conversation stay online? How do they respond to that? Somebody who respects your boundaries is going to continue to respect your boundaries. If they violate your boundaries in a small way and they try to talk you out of it, or they use charm, or they use whatever it may be, or, oh, you know, you shouldn't be afraid of me, or, you know, they use this kind of language, then they're going to violate your boundaries in a big way at some point. And that's really where I also kind of identify it's a little bit of an abusive cycle that you see anyway in domestic violence and other abusive relationships, is they will do everything, whether it's charm. If you look at some of these romance scammers, kind of the tactics they play in building and getting your confidence in them and how they go about that. But one of the key areas is boundaries, and keeping a close eye on boundaries and how they respond to your boundaries when you say no.
There's a question here from Kathy. What age group is most often scammed in dating sites?
You know, it's always interesting. Of course, people, you know, in that age group from like 45 again to 65 are traditionally what we think, and I would say those are the highest reported. I believe actually the younger folks are scammed just as much. The scams just look different. So we're seeing a lot of scams also with that younger generation. They're more confidence type scams versus like romance type scams. However, they're being scammed just as much. They're less likely to report. So somebody, you know, and this is the other tip, is really encouraging people to report. If you don't report, then, you know, it's hard for us to know that something has happened or that we need to take action, unless it's something that has been picked up through our ML modeling, or, you know, we developed ML modeling to identify harassing language, and we can ask you, you know, if you feel that is harassing, and it encourages you to report. So, you know, we have developed some technology to capture some of that. But what I tell people is, you know, we're not going to know what happened once you met somebody in real life, you know, maybe even the connection that you're having with them and you're communicating with them on another platform, because we don't have the connection. If you go to WhatsApp, we don't know what's being said on WhatsApp or what's happening. So reporting to us is really an important piece. But what we find with the younger generations is they're not likely to report these type of things. And for that matter, men are not likely to report either. We find that they are not likely to report.
Interesting. Shauna, did you have a question?
I did. Tracey, you're amazing. Thank you so much for everything, and for teaching us all this, and just for your role of what you do. I'm just blown away. I have teenagers, and I also have an aging mother, and both of them would like to take Ubers. And both of them feel very uncomfortable. So my mother is 75 and starting to want to travel. My father recently passed away. my teenagers are, 16, 17, 18. Advice. For me in that space of having young kids, as also having an aging mother that would like, not aging, but like a mother that would like some independence, but doesn't want to have the responsibility of driving, what is on the platform, or what tips can you give?
Yeah, there's great technology on the platform, and I think there's a lot of technology that people are not aware of that, I also worked very hard to get them to develop while I was there. I tell people when I walked into Uber, it was like pushing a boulder up a mountain. It's like, we need to, you got to pay attention to this, and finally they did, and now, safety has completely changed at Uber and what that looks like. So, the big thing is, and one of the trends that we really saw at Uber when it comes to safety, I think, majority of the time you're going to use an Uber, you're certainly going to be safe, but there's certain technology that's in place you should certainly be leveraging and taking advantage of. And I also just, I will, particularly teenagers and college students are using Ubers when they go out. So let's talk about the teen piece versus elderly. Is they're typically using Ubers when they're going out to drink, they're going out to entertainment districts, they're doing those things. The biggest thing that I saw, and the majority of assaults that we saw at Uber happened at night in an entertainment district. So it was very much, and what I'll say is it's consistent with people who are bad actors look for people in vulnerable situations. They will take advantage of a vulnerable situation. Whether it's somebody walking out of a shopping center and they're not paying attention and they're looking down, they tell you about those basic tips, right? People who during the holidays are looking to target you, or they're looking in other countries to target you for stealing something from you, they're looking for people who are distracted. They're in a distracted or vulnerable situation where they're carrying 5 bags. Somebody's going to grab one of them. Same way in entertainment district, when alcohol is involved, the majority of assaults they were seeing, somebody was intoxicated, they were alone, okay? And they had passed out in the back of an Uber, whatever might have happened, or somebody's targeting them within those clubs, which was a trend before Uber even came along, of getting somebody who's in a vulnerable situation and drawing them outside of that location. So one of the things I did at Uber is I took this approach of we will create technology. So really reminding people in those spaces and those times to, travel, or basically don't get an Uber. They won't say don't get in an Uber alone. I'll tell you, don't get in an Uber alone. Okay. If you're intoxicated and you're out with friends, make sure your friends stick together. So that's the big thing. And I saw that trend on college campuses and there are also people out there targeting who are not driving for Uber. They are targeting those areas, okay, on purpose. So like your fake Uber drivers, Lyft drivers. So being aware that you're in the right vehicle is important. The technology that we create around that, and I still have it I still use it, is you can go into your settings and you can activate a PIN. And it's not an automatic. You have to go into your settings to set it up. But it will basically, every time you get an Uber at late at night, and late at night is you can set it, let's say after 8 p.m. until 7 a.m. in the morning, it will ask you it'll give you a PIN. You have to provide that PIN to the driver before they can go forward. So we created technology to also identify that you're in the right Uber. So if you actually get in a wrong Uber, messaging may pop up and say, are you in the right Uber? Are you in the right vehicle? So there's technology in space there. I would say use the PIN. There's share your trips with friends and family. You can go into the setting and that was something I also worked on at Uber and developed. That's great. And so you can go in and put like basically whoever you want to put in there, friends, family, and you can share your trip. one of the things, sharing the trip is an important thing, because you can watch them you can watch a person in real time in that Uber. And it's also, friends can kind of follow and make sure that person gets home and to their destination safely. So those are probably two, I would say, the most important safety features. You can also contact 911. You can text 911. So I was there. We also created an opportunity for that, because there was the concern, and I felt like it was putting people in an unsafe situation. If I've got a driver who's a bad actor and I'm trying to call 911, I've just signaled to that driver that I'm calling the police. So that driver's going to take actions to potentially. And what happened also, we saw, is that women in vulnerable situations, the police were telling me that the suspect was taking their phones away from them while they're passed out, so they have no phone to be able to activate. So there's things like that. I think the biggest thing for teens and for college students is take those things together. You know, we trained security guards. We developed a training with No More that went to all the major cities, a lot of the entertainment districts, to train security guards to not toss women into Ubers alone. It's like, okay, there's a drunk woman, let's put her in an Uber and send her home.
Right.
That's not the right action. And so we did a training to help train security guards on not doing that and what type of actions to take. We even had police doing that. So it was like, this is not the right approach to take. So I think that's the big one for the teens. For for an elderly person, it's using the same things at the end of the day. I mean, very rarely are you seeing harm against those communities, particularly in the gig economy and the sharing platforms. But it's taking those same steps and, making sure that you're sharing location. I think the sharing location is a big one. I have a good friend who her father is dealing with some of the issues, and now he's going to use Uber because he can't drive anymore. But he also forgets where he's at sometimes. And so it's a great way for family also, if they're concerned about their loved ones, and making sure that they're getting to the location that they need to get to. So I think those safety features are some of the better ones. There's lots of safety features in the app that are kind of built into the experience, but making sure you're in the right car. If you feel nervous about anything, you can live chat with Uber, even on the ride. We developed real-time messaging to check in on people. So if you've used Uber, you may get that message every once in a while to ask you how your trip is going, particularly if it goes off course, you will get that message. But things like that, I think, are very important. The last thing I'll say is be careful about using in different countries. There are, locations where the airports or others will not allow Uber to pick you up in the airport. So for example, for the longest time in Puerto Vallarta, you'd have to go outside the airport, go cross a freeway basically to get to the Uber pickup. People were getting robbed on the way to trying to get to those pickups. So just being careful about the areas that you're in if you're wanting to use like rideshare, knowing where your pickup locations are going to be and being very cognizant that it may not be directly in the airport where the pickup is. So that's some of my recommendation. I use Uber all the time. I still, to this day, use it everywhere I go, and I use it internationally. So,
thank you. That was very helpful.
Yeah, those are some good. I'm going to talk to my daughter right after this.
I'll be at the retreat too. We can talk all day. We'll have days to talk about this. I've got great safety tips. And some of them I'll tell you, off the record. It's the off the record Tracey tips, That's
excellent. Any other questions for Tracey? Otherwise, or questions about the retreat that we're doing? Those of you that are coming, what are you most looking forward to? Those of you that have signed up.
I'm really excited about all the different types of speakers that you have. We're touching on so many huge range of different topics. And I'm hoping to meet a lot of other like-minded women. But I'm just blown away by the thoughtfulness in which you've programmed everything. And also just the location looks really, really beautiful and restorative.
Thanks, Andrea. Yeah, it's interesting. When we started planning this, I think it's been over a year now, because we started talking about this. I actually got the invoice for the website domain name. That's how I know. And so it's been a year, and the world was in a different place then, and we weren't sure what things would look like now. And we, as Tracey was saying at the beginning, there have been some, not only the pandemic, but some pretty big shifts that require, I think, women's action and attention. So the timing of this retreat, I think, couldn't be better. And if there was ever a group of women gathered together who can create good, positive, strong change, I think we have this group together. And with all of, not just the speakers, but I mean, everyone coming to this, because it really is a, for me, it'll be not only is it our first one, but it's going to be an incredible opportunity. And I just wanted to mention, those of you that aren't coming, or cannot come, if you know somebody that you think might be interested in this, please do let us know. We still have a few places left, and we would love to welcome you and welcome them to come to this and meet these women. Having, we can go on and on about the speakers, but all these speakers gathered together in one place, I can't imagine this ever happening this way again. So I think we really lucked out with our speakers. Don't you, Sherry?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm very excited.
And I know we're probably going to have another call in logistics, but if you do have, those of you that are coming or want to come, if you have questions, Sherry is your go-to on any questions that you might have. And I think I'm going to see some of you this week in New York City at Andrea's. We're going to be talking about this. And then we've got a JourneyWoman meetup on Saturday in Grand Central Park, or Central Park, I should say. And another JourneyWoman meetup a week Saturday in Toronto. So lots of opportunities to connect and get together. But I want to thank Tracey so much for coming and sharing your perspective and your passion and your energy. And thank you for all you've done to protect women. It's really amazing. I'm almost speechless listening to you. Oh, I did this and this and disrupted. And it's yeah.
Oh, well, thank you.
Big stuff.
It hasn't been easy, but certainly I tell people I was wired to do it. Apparently, there are days where I wish I wasn't the person that had to be in there disrupting, and then there are days where I realize that this is the reason I am who I am. So to be able to do this, and I'll end with this. There was a great quote. I can't remember who said it, from the women's movement back in the day, that you really create change and movement when you get in that place where you have nothing to lose. And that's where I feel I have nothing to lose. I have to fight for these things. And I have to disrupt them and not accept, no for an answer when it comes to, the protection of women and marginalized communities. So.
Yeah, and also I'll say it's a great way to look at safety, because sometimes I worry people have forgotten about safety, especially when it's related to women in travel. We think because we have this technology that we are safer. And I often look back at the women that were traveling solo 20, 30, 40 years ago, and how courageous and brave they were. And they would go off into the world with nothing. And I've spoken to many of those women, and many of them have written books about traveling solo to places that I, honestly, I'm not even sure I would go today, but they did it in the 70s and the 60s. So, this is, I don't know, I'm glad to bring safety back into the discussion in a different way, in a really relevant way. And because I don't want us to forget about it. It's really, really important.
Yeah.
And you've elevated it.
I love the language you use, Tracey, about the bad actors, because I think sometimes we get confused about like, is technology bad and is it doing, and it's more that there are bad actors that they're gonna be bad actors, you know, no matter what happens. And how can we use technology in our favor and to be smart about it? And it's interesting. I'm a professor at the School of Visual Arts, and I teach a course called Pitch Perfect, and and this was right during the pandemic, we were focusing on, we had selected Uber as the brand, and it was all about women's safety. We were working with the CMO at the time, Thomas Renice, and because of because of the pandemic, the focus had to go towards what was going on there. But it's remarkable to hear all of what you've done, because many of the ideas that came up with these students, you've delivered. And I can say personally, I use Uber all the time. I've had situations where, my Uber driver had to go get gas and he was being a little flaky, and only to have people calling and checking in and saying, we've noticed you've stopped. Is everything okay? Also just getting to know that, to your point, there are many different settings and things that were always there, but perhaps people didn't know about it or hadn't, searched a little bit more. So to be able to help our daughters and help our mothers, but also even help to encourage women. The thing that was shocking to me was women drivers, and that a lot of them would prefer to only work during certain times because of what you're talking about. They would get harassed. So the other thing we can continue to do is just remind our sons and everyone that that everyone deserves respect, and people do really stupid things, and just the amount of abuse that women, in particular these women drivers, would take. They would much rather deliver food than they would people, and you get paid quite a bit less, and so it just perpetuates the whole economic cycle, right?
It does, and we see that even to a greater degree internationally. I remember when, in Saudi Arabia, women got the right to drive, but they set the fees for a driver's license so high that women could not purchase. And so we decided at Uber that we would buy their driver's license and then we would give them jobs to drive. But as a result of that, they experienced a great amount of violence. And so we had to create a women driving women product there because of all the violence that they faced by being a driver. But it just shows that, and that was only a handful of years ago. It hasn't been that long ago that I was at Uber and we were talking through that. But there's so much to do in this space, and there's such opportunity. And so much opportunity with these great, powerful women full of wisdom and knowledge to come together to think about what actions can we take in our world today that really are connected to our safety, because connected to our safety is our freedom.
Such a beautiful point, because I think we feel equal parts like excited to have that freedom again to roam and explore and grow. And even though I felt like such a competent traveler before, now I don't. And things have changed, and it's sort of funny how like we all feel more vulnerable, and rightly so.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I'm excited about it. Lots of good conversations.
Me too.
Carolyn. It's awesome.
There are. Yes, we're gonna have them all. Nothing is off the table. Nothing is taboo in my world. So let's do it.
Let's go.
Okay, ladies, I'm gonna let you go. And thank you all for making time for this. We really appreciate it. And thank you for being here. Thank you for listening and asking questions. And I'm here if you have any questions. So is Sherry. And we'll see some of you next week.